What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Old Eyes, New Glasses podcast. We are so excited today to start our podcast series on fatherhood. Today, we are joined by Charles Chappie Jones, longtime friend of ours. And I just wanted to say, brother, we are happy to have you here today. Chappie is the vice mayor of the city of San Jose, California. You are kicking it off, brother. You're a trailblazer today, man. You're the first guest in this series.
Well, I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to be a trailblazer.
There you go. There you go. Avery, what's going on with you, man? How are you today, brother?
I'm doing great. And I just want to, let everybody in. Uncle Chappie, it's good to have you on the call. And, for those of you that aren't familiar, as Black people, this is what we do. I've known you my entire life. So now you're my uncle. So
Right.
That's how we do it.
Part of the family.
There it is. There it is. Well, man, as I said, we are starting the podcast series on fatherhood and excited to have you here, man, because of the experiences that we've shared together as fathers growing up, raising kids. And if you could tell everybody a little bit about your kids, their ages, that way people have the background of, your children, because it's going to be important. We're going to be speaking to fathers that have young kids, fathers that have just boys, fathers that have just girls. So give everybody a little bit about your kids, and then we'll get started and chop it up. I'll turn it over to Avery. He can get us going here.
Okay. Well, I have two children, a boy and a girl. My daughter, who's the oldest, is 25. Her name is Sydney. And my son, Peyton, is 24. So they're 15 months apart. So Irish twins.
Nice. Well, I actually didn't know that they were that close in age. I know that Justin and I are like 21 months, and that was the closest that I had ever been familiar with. So that's really cool to know.
15 months apart. Sydney was 6 months old when Kelly came to me and told me she was pregnant. The only thing I can say is, how did that happen?
Yeah.
And then I just shook my head. I was a beaten man at that point. Because because that meant 2 in diapers. It was.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot going on, man. I mean, the story, my story is not too different from that, to be candid with you, because before Avery was born, Lynette and I have been married for 5 years, and so we were not trying to have kids, but we weren't not trying to have kids. You know what I'm saying?
I know what
and
you
so
mean.
This dude comes along and we're like, okay, cool. We got a kid 5 years into our marriage. We've had an opportunity to kick it, alone, do our thing, travel a little bit, get to know each other. This dude comes on the scene. So, he was kind of planned. But then when Justin came along 21 months later, that brother wasn't nowhere near planned. So my reaction was like yours. It wasn't like, how did that happen? It was just kind of like, damn, already?
Well, my how did that happen is equivalent to your damn already. That was same sentiment, just different words.
Same, definitely.
I get it. I definitely get it. Well, we just want to, jump in. Avery, I'm going to turn this over to you, for some questions throughout, our time together here, and just excited about this, man. Just looking forward to what questions turn into other questions, perhaps. And we'll go ahead and go from there, Avery. But go ahead, man. Let's start us off, Avery.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really curious and intrigued about this podcast series. Now, I mean, I'm not a father, but I really think that these this series of episodes can be beneficial for me. And I might be able to learn some things as I potentially get to fatherhood in several years from now. But one of the things that we always do, that my dad and I always do when we have a keynote or a presentation, is we like to ask the audience this one question, and that's, who are you? And that's one way that we're able to get people started on that journey of self-awareness, get people curious about reflection and getting to know themselves a little bit better. And so the first question that I had for you, Uncle Chappie, is if I were to ask who you are as a father, I'm curious to know how you would answer that question.
I would answer that question. I've actually given this a lot of thought. And I would answer that question as I think of myself as a flawed father who's always striving to do the best I can for my children.
That's deep. That's deep. I like that because there's always room for growth. And I think that if, you know, but that's an interesting perspective to have, because somebody might hear that and say, well, flawed father, you know, well, what are we doing here? But that's, if you know, and if you're cognizant that you can always improve upon who you are as a person and as a father, then you're always kind of trying to get better. You're always looking to see what methods can be better for my kids. So I like that.
Yeah. Well, you can tell by my answer that I've given this some thought. Even before you asked me the question, I've been thinking a lot about that.
What's interesting about that, Chap, is you know, Avery mentioned that when we do our keynotes, that we try to make them very interactive, or we're doing you know, a workshop or a training session, we always begin with the process of self-discovery, the process of self-awareness, because that's where, you know, our growth as parents and as people really comes from, right? Starting out with self-awareness and going from there. So I think it's kind of cool that you thought about that, because there's a lot of people, trust and believe, that haven't. And when we just talk about the process of self-awareness, you know, with teams of people or different organizations, it's such a struggle for people to answer that question, because most people don't think about who they are. Most people don't think about who they are as a person, let alone as a parent or a father. So kudos to you, brother, for giving that some thought, man. And it really does reflect some honesty. And self-awareness is about diving in and being very honest and having some accurate self-assessments, man. So, you know, man, you're ahead of the game already.
Well, plus the fact, you know, at my age, I'm just too old to try to BS somebody. You know, it is what it is.
That's it. You know? That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, let me follow up with a question that I think is really interesting as a father and somebody who's we're close to the same age. You have some years on me, man. Not many, but you have some on me. And so, if you could share with us a moment or an event or a circumstance, however you want to put it, share with us like one of those things, one of those moments that made you the father that you are today. Is there any particular instance that you think defined who you were or directed you towards who you became as a dad, that flawed individual that you mentioned a few minutes ago?
Yeah, there's probably a bunch, but one that just really jumps out at me, you know, based on your question. My son Peyton, who was at the time, probably about 19, 20. And I went into his room and I was getting on him about something he wasn't doing, or should have been doing. And he looked up at me and he said, you know, Dad, the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. And all I could do was just say, you got me. I turned around and just walked out. And
you gave up.
and that was a really defining moment for me as a father, and particularly my relationship with my son, because, you know, for years, you know, I've been getting on him about, you know, what he should be doing and what he shouldn't be doing. And I realized in that moment that he was patterning a lot of his behavior after me. But where I realized that maybe I didn't do the things I should have been doing as a father in terms of translating my behavior and what he's observing and helping him understand that my behavior and my actions and my demeanor were all directed towards, a positive outcome or positive direction in life, both, my professional life as well as my personal life. So he observed, my being laid back and, kind of mellow demeanor and, don't get too worked up about anything and just taking everything as it comes. But he didn't see the other part of it. And so at that moment, I realized that he was trying to emulate me. I was a role model for him, but yet he didn't understand or didn't translate all the things that I was doing that he didn't appreciate or realize or see that led me in the direction I was going in life. So that was a real defining moment for me as a parent, as a father, and as a father of a son.
Wow. That's pretty deep, man. What that is making me want to ask you now is, do you have a moment like that with Sydney? Being that there's a difference between raising girls and boys. Now, obviously, I have 2 boys, but I have friends that have girls and boys, and many of them have told me for years, like, dude, it's night and day. Like, you have no idea. So is there something, that you could share with us with Sydney that was a moment and possibly because she's of a different gender?
So I definitely raised my children differently, a boy and a girl. I still have that old school in me. I push Sydney, I try to, have her, achieve, whatever, level of achievement that she can attain, work hard, be focused. So I've never had a double standard in terms of expectations for my children, but in terms of how I push my children, I'm much harder on my son than I am on my daughter. A lot more supportive of her in terms of when she falls, picking her back up. I do the same for my son, but it's just different. It's just a different dynamic. And I think one of the defining moments for me is when Sydney graduated from college. And just to give you a little context, she's always had a learning disability. And she overcame that learning disability to graduate from high school, go to the University of Arizona, and it took her 5 years, but she graduated from college with 2 degrees, overcoming a learning disability. So the level of pride and respect that I have for her because of that accomplishment, I just can't articulate. I was just so proud of her. And what I did is I wrote her a letter. A letter to Sydney, like, hey, I'm so proud of you. You're graduating from college. You've overcome all these obstacles. And let me just tell you about your journey that you're going to have. You're going to have successes. You're going to have failures. You're going to have roadblocks that you're going to have to overcome. You're going to have heartbreak, but you're also going to have joy. You're going to have success. You're going to have achievement, but you're going to go through all those things. And I just want you to know that I'm there with you every step of the way, and I'll always be there to support you. When you fall, I'll pick you back up. When you achieve, I'll be the first one to clap and celebrate. But I just want you to know that you're starting this journey of life, and you have me as your father to be there always for you, to support you and lift you up. So that was a defining moment for me in terms of even just writing that letter. Because, in this day and age, people don't write letters anymore.
Right.
So I got a letter from my father when I graduated from college that I have to this day. And so one of the things I said is, when my children graduate from college, I'm going to write them this letter. And that's what I did. So that was a very defining moment for me as a father. with my daughter, Sydney.
I love that, man. I love that. Abe, you look like you want to jump in and say something.
Well, first off, one thing I wanted to acknowledge is there's nothing wrong with taking that extra year in college. I did it myself. So I just want to show Sydney some support right now.
I did too, Avery. So
there we go. And look at you now.
No judgmental, anything coming from me on that one.
Yeah. No, that's I think knowing Sydney, I've always been inspired, and we've kept in touch for so long, especially during those college years. And during those college years, just, periodically checking in with each other and seeing the progress. And then both of us, we're in the same grade. So we graduated high school at the same time. And then both of us taking that extra year, but graduating college at the same time. I think that's always been really cool. And me knowing that, she's been resilient. She's persevered through those things that you just pointed out. And in part, I can relate with me dealing with ADD. And so in part, I feel like we've always connected around that. One thing that kind of was prompted from listening to you, I know you talked about Peyton, and you talked about how his comment, fruits don't fall far from trees. And I think that's really interesting, because I too kind of hold that same thought when my dad is talking to me about something, or when he's getting on me about something, just internally, one of my first thoughts sometimes is, what were you doing at 23? How were you at 22? And so I think that it's really interesting, because I've learned as I've gotten older, parents, they always, more often than not, they just want the best for their kids. And good parents want the best for their kids. And sometimes that comes out in the form of telling their kids what to do, as opposed to, allowing their kids to live through that process of, failure, get back up, failure, pick yourself back up, learn some things along the way. And so and my dad, he will admit to this, I'm sure, but sometimes I feel like that's a little bit of the disconnect that we have, is I feel like I need to learn along the way. Like, he can tell me so much, but unless and I'm hard-headed, admittedly, I'm hard-headed, but unless I'm doing it and then, picking things up along the way and then going through those successes and then achieving that thing, I don't respond well to then just being told well, this is what you need to be doing. So this is a long way to get around to my question, but have you ever found that there's points where you just want to give your kids the answer? And then if so, how have they received that? If they've received that, I'm really curious, of your experience with that.
Well, to answer your question is yes. That's the only mode I know, is give them the answer. And the reason why, Avery, is your father and I, we've been through the journey. We've been through the struggle. We've fallen on our face and on our backs. We've seen our peers, people that we've grown up with, brothers along the way that are no longer with us, or didn't make it, or living on the street, or just, whatever outcome they had because they took the wrong path, or, they didn't listen to people that were trying to give them advice. So we have that collective memory, and we want to just provide that to you so that you don't have to make those same mistakes. You don't have to feel that same pain. You don't have to, have those same experiences of disappointment or despair. We want you to avoid all of that. And we feel like if you just listen to what we had to say, you don't have to go through that. You might have a new journey that you might go on, but you have to go on the same journey that we've already been down. We've seen that movie. We know how it ends. And so you don't have to, you can make your own movie. You can have your own script. You can have your own ending. And so that's where the frustration is. We have this collective wisdom. And it's not like, we're saying we're smarter than anybody else, but we have that experience. And that's where a lot of wisdom comes from, is that just going through it. So if, whether it's someone's your child or someone else's child, you just want to give them as much knowledge and wisdom as you can, so that they don't have to make those same mistakes or go down that same path or have that same journey. So that's like the only mode I know how to go down. It's like, here's the answer.
Yeah.
And so it's been a struggle for me as a parent to watch my kids not listen to what I'm telling them and experience, that painful journey that how it's going to end because you've been through it. Mm-hmm. So, it's like watching, sometimes it's like you're watching a car wreck that's about to happen. And it's like, people, I know there's going to be a car accident. It's going to be a wreck. It's going to be a collision. And it's happening in slow motion. And you're trying to tell the drivers, hey, swerve, swerve. And nobody's listening to you. And then next thing you know, you have the collision.
Yeah.
So that's
that's just interesting, Chap. The way that you answered that question, and I think one of the coolest parts about what Avery and I have embarked on, starting at the end of 2017, with working together. One of the coolest parts about it is the opportunity to work with, obviously, your child. He's not a child, he's a grown man, but to work with your son, and then the generational differences come about that present some challenges that you have to work through as business partners, and different approaches to things. And I think one of the things that I've had to steadily learn over the past couple of years is to try to pull back on doing the very thing that you talked about, right? And rely on his generational perspective on some things that perhaps would be more beneficial for us when we're talking to teams and organizations, or if we're speaking to a group of parents and that sort of thing, or developing a particular keynote, or developing a high school commencement speech like we did earlier this year for a high school in Oregon. A lot of that was like relying on his youth to relate to these young people. Mm-hmm. What's my 55-year-old behind, going really, what kind of knowledge am I going to impart on them to make it resonate, right? So that's been kind of my learning experience and my journey, just working with him. So on the flip side, from what Avery was saying, it's like, I've had to kind of learn to back up and appreciate, the perspective that he brings as well. So no, I totally get it. It's interesting because that leads me to my next question for you. I mentioned that you are, the vice mayor of the city of San Jose. You're a city council member, but I also know that you've been an entrepreneur. I know that you have worked extensively in corporate America in a variety of positions there. And so has your work experience, the things that you've gathered along the way, did it influence the approach that you took as a father? And you kind of shared a few minutes ago, like you wanted to give answers, but have your experiences in the workplace, not just in life, but your journey in terms of how you've made a living, did that influence any way in which you approached fatherhood? And if so, how? Don't know if it has, but if so, how?
I think it has. I probably would say the main thing is, I'll call it the pursuit of happiness. I've had an opportunity in my life and in my career to do many different things, be an entrepreneur, work in corporate America, being an elected official. So I've had a variety of experiences, and the common theme I think that is behind a lot of the things that I've done is in search of that happiness in terms of what I'm doing and the contribution that I'm making, whether it's to a company, to society. And I see that heavily influences what I tell my children, how I relate to my children in terms of them trying to find themselves and what their passion is, or what they can do in the world that's going to bring them joy and happiness. And I'm not one of those people that believes that, you know, your job or your career defines you and defines, you know, whether you're going to have happiness in life. But I think there should be some type of satisfaction that you know that you're making a contribution to the world. And again, that could be in the form of being in the private sector and working in a company that's doing something that's, you know, contributing to society, or a nonprofit or a public sector. But I have focused on trying to get my kids to think about what they can do, what kind of career they can go in that is going to give them that level of satisfaction and bring a certain amount of joy into their lives. So that's a common theme that I have in terms of my discussions with both of my kids.
I like that, because at the end of the day, it really is their journey. And one of the things that I think as dads and as parents, you know, this is for moms too, and it's a learning process for some of us, not for all, but I think it comes a realization that the satisfaction that they yearn to have has to be defined by them. Mm-hmm. Right? And, you know, that sometimes becomes the hard part, a little bit of a struggle, you know, and I'll speak for myself, as I get a little bit older and try to continuously do the self-exploration of, at the end of the day, like, I can't define what makes them happy, right? We can't define what makes anybody else happy. My wife told me when we were about 3 years into our marriage, man, we've been married for 30 years now. And I've never forgotten this. You know, we were just kind of going through those early blues, mm-hmm. right? That you go through in marriage. And I just said to her, like, you know what, like, I don't know how to really make you happy right now. And she said, she looked me in the eye, Chap, and she said, you can never make me happy. I have to make me happy.
Wow.
I was like, oh, snap. Right? And it really made me think. It really made me think of, like, yo, that's so deep for her to say at, I guess, age, 26 at the time, 27 at the time, was just kind of like, brother, back up, because, like, whatever it is that you're doing, like, if it's not within, you know, it doesn't matter if it's not coming from within. And so, same thing I think about now when parents are raising their kids, like, the happiness can't necessarily be defined by us. It has to be defined by them.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah. Avery, yeah. I'll go with you, bro. Go ahead.
I think that's interesting too, because you know, sometimes, and I grew up with kids who I felt like it seemed like their parents were living vicariously through their kids and trying to essentially enforce, you know, some level of happiness or some type of happiness into their life. And I was always kind of it was off-putting. It was like, oh man, like, you know, I was glad that my parents never, you know, pushed for something that I felt like it was their happiness, or it was their dream to do. But yeah, I just think that's a really insightful, you know, piece of information to know. The next question that I have for you is, now I've got friends, it's really interesting. I'm at this point now in my life where at 24 years old, going to be 25 in a couple of weeks. Like, I know people that are starting to have kids, and people my age are starting to have kids. And now I'm leaving that age range where it's like, oh, like, how did you have a kid already? To now it's like, oh yeah, like, you're an adult. You know, this is what adults do. Like, they have kids. And so I'm now at this point where I'm starting to see that more. And like I said, I have friends that are fathers, friends that are mothers, parents. So my question to you is, if you could give a piece of advice to a young dad, somebody who's, you know, just recently had their kid, or maybe even, you know, him and his girl are pregnant, or him and his partner are pregnant, what is one thing that you can offer up? And I know that we kind of alluded to this. You like giving answers, so I think that this might be right up your alley.
You know, I'm just gonna say the first thing that came to my mind when you just asked that question, and my first piece of advice to a new father or an expecting father is, if they had a father in their life, look at what their father did in terms of raising them, and then try to incorporate all the positive things that their father did, and try to eliminate all the negative things. And the reason why I say that is because as fathers and as human beings, we carry all that with us, even if it's not conscious. Subconsciously, we have all the things that our fathers did, good or bad, is in us. And we just have to be conscious of that, and just be conscious of all the positive things that your father did, or the male in your life did, and replicate that. And then all of the negative things that they did, change it. Don't continue it. So that would be the main piece of advice that I would give to a new father or an expecting father.
Yeah.
I think that answer that you gave is time tested, because I really don't care, you know, what's happening in the world today. Obviously, you know, young parents now, young fathers now are raising their kids in a different era than when we raised, you know, our kids, and then obviously when our parents raised us. But what you said lives through the generations, man, because at the end of the day, you know, as I've told Avery before, when we've been talking about some things, I'm like, it's good to know what you know, but also know what you don't know. And you know, so you take the stuff that, as you said, that was modeled for you, and you take out the good stuff, and you remove the stuff that didn't work for you, because at the end of the day, it's your style of parenting. It's got to be your style of fatherhood. And so no, I dig that. And I just chuckled a little bit when Avery was talking about growing up with kids whose parents were kind of living vicariously through them. You know, I saw that a lot when we did the AAU basketball circuit for like almost 10 years. You know, Avery and I together, like, out of the 10 years, I probably coached him about 7 of those years. And, you know, he definitely could attest to, I wasn't that parent that was like, oh, in sports, my son is the starting point guard and he's going to have the ball all the time. Or in baseball, like, he's leading off and playing shortstop. Or in football, he's the quarterback. Like, I was like not that dad. I was not that kind of coach. I was that dude that was like, yo, sports are life lessons. Like, you got to earn your playing time. Right? I don't care if you're my son, right? The bottom line is, like, if you're not doing what needs to be done in practice, like, you riding pie. If you get into the game and we've been working on something in practice, and you go in and, you know, you make mistakes and you make errors, but if I feel like you're not even focused, or you're not like zoned in, like, you coming out. So it was just one of those things. I just chuckled at that, Avery, because we all know those dads, man, that were just kind of like, I have to do this for my kid because I'm the coach. And I think they were doing such a disservice to their kids. I might have gone extreme in the other direction. Avery will probably tell you that. But at the end of the day, it was just kind of like, being built for life, as I mentioned to you a little bit earlier today, being built for life. That's what that's all about. So, as we wrap our time up together here, one of the things that, as we're closing out the year 2020, we've all obviously been dealing with once in our lifetime, hopefully, pandemic that has just been affecting the entire planet. And the question that I have for you, even though your kids are grown, like my kids are grown now, has this pandemic, has COVID-19 in any way, shape, or form affected how you view your role as a dad? And again, knowing that they're grown, but you're still a dad, right? You're still a father. So has the situation that we've been living through, what has it done to you in terms of viewing your role as a father?
That's a great question. And I've actually given this a lot of thought too. Because of this pandemic, it's really highlighted a lot of the inequalities in our society, racial inequalities, gender inequalities, class, and the haves and the have-nots. And I'm fortunate to be a have. We have a nice home, a refrigerator full of food, all the comforts of life. But I also work in a profession, being the council member and the vice mayor of the 10th largest city in the country, that has that literally distributes about 2.5 million meals a week to folks who don't even have enough food to eat. People that can't pay their rent, people who have to choose between food and medicine. There's a lot of suffering that was already taking place in the COVID-19 is really highlighted and amplified the disparity and the hardship. And then I see my children who are living with me right now through this pandemic, who literally have all the comforts that you can imagine. And as a parent, one of my concerns is that there doesn't appear to be an understanding, one, of how fortunate they are, and also their obligation to society and to the community and to the have-nots. And so a discussion that's been coming up quite often in my household is, one is, do you have an appreciation for how fortunate you are? And two, what are you going to do to pay it forward and make a contribution to your community and to society in terms of the people who aren't as fortunate? And it was a realization to me that, I just thought my kids would just get that, growing up, seeing their parents who, contribute to the greater community, and it would just be part of their DNA. And it didn't translate. They became very comfortable with their life and lifestyle. And so during this pandemic, it's really created an awareness that as a parent, I need to constantly reinforce and try to plant those seeds to have them be more engaged citizens, be more involved with the community, and try to make the world a better place as opposed to just their own individual lifestyles or professions. So that's something that's really come to the forefront for me in terms of my being a parent and working with my kids to make them better adults.
I love that, man. It's almost one of them things where it's kind of like, do it for my grandkids. Like, instill it in my grandkids. If you're not going to get these lessons that I'm giving you, make sure the grandkids get
Make sure the grandkids did.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it, man. That's deep. That's deep right
Yeah.
there. Well, Avery, I'll turn this over to you, man, so you can kind of wrap us up and close us out. And let me just say this before you do that, Chappie. Thank you for joining us, man. I think that you have an important voice to parenting, to fatherhood, to experience the diversity of your experiences in life, and I appreciate you being the one to kick us off on this series, man. I'm excited just to hear the voices of the other dads that we're going to be talking to, and as Avery and I go into the year 2021 with some stuff that we want to do around the family and fatherhood in particular, man, I can't think of a better way to kind of to start us off, brother. So I appreciate you, from the bottom of my heart. You know that already, though. But Abe, go ahead, dude.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for checking out another episode of the Old Eyes, New Glasses Fatherhood series. Be sure to hit that subscribe button below to see all of our latest videos, or check out some of our best clips.